Good morning. Ayin Beis, Volume 3. We are at the bottom of page 1297. So yesterday, the Rebbe Rashab, we learned that Rebbe Rashab continued the bottom paragraph. Havaya Merivov is reaching a level that's higher than Chesed and Gvura, and is able to draw down from a place that eliminates all the enemy, all the opponents, and all the prosecutors. And he compared it. He said, like we see with Teda, that Teda, even when it comes down below, and we're talking even as Managolos, even when we're talking here, where it comes down through a concealment, like we said, the two levels of Chassidus, it comes down to concealment, but we are mamshich from a place that is able to eliminate the enemies, the opponents, the judgments. So same thing, Teda, Divitei Makablim Tuma. Like the Gemara says, Daf Chav Beis Aleph, Brachis 22a, that the Divitei Makablim Tuma, the Ein Eish Shel Gehenim Sheletas Behem. The Talmid Chachamim, the fire of Gehenim does not affect them, does not control, does not dominate, does not Sheletas, basically govern them or control them. So even though we're talking about Teda not in heaven, we're talking about Teda below. It's coming down into this world. And that's where he compared the same thing. Even when it comes bisalmos in a concealed state, it eliminates. So to say, in a sense, it's like immune. In Teda, it's immune to Tuma, and here it eliminates opponents. That's the comparison. And the Yeshlemer Eid, he came to add to that. He said, you can say furthermore, based on what we learned earlier, that Torah is compared to the Oir. Torah is the level of Oir of Shem Havaya. And Mitzvahs is the level of the Oisius, the letters of Shem Havaya. So that means the Chitzenius of the Primius. That's why Torah, in a sense, repels and does not contract impurity. In mitzvahs, there could be something that the negative forces have some hold, some grasp. Like he gave the example of the garments that wear down. The garments of the mitzvahs could be impacted by the negative forces. Okay. And that's because mitzvahs come from the chetzenius of the premius, and Torah is connected to the premius, so even when it comes down below. So I said I would look up and look a little bit more into this. So first of all, the Gemara, which I should have realized yesterday, but I'll just say it now, is talking about Tfilas Ezra, where there's different opinions, whether a person who, a Balkedi, a person who's seen semen, come out of him, so that's a tumah. That's a form of impurity. So Ezra said because of that, a person shouldn't learn Torah until they go to the mikveh. The other opinions say, no, that's not the case because ein divrei Torah mekablim tuma. So even though a person may have released that and that causes an impurity, the Torah is not mekabel tuma. And the Gemara even tells a story of a student who is stammering because he was saying something, and Rav Sheshis, I think, whoever the Tana there says to him, no, don't stammer, speak up, because divrei Torah mekabel tuma, just like fire does not absorb or retain or contract impurity, so too Torah, because Torah divrei, what's it called? Divrei ke'esh. Yeah, the Torah is like esh, like fire. Okay, so that's the basic shot that we're not talking. We're talking about that ability that you can learn Torah, because Torah does not assume it. Now, he says right. Yeah. Now he says so far I found that it was actually explained earlier in Ayin Beis. If you have volume 2 on page 2 pages to page 725, the chapter 353, page 325, the Maimer of Vayera Love Ayin Hey, and again on page 789, which actually is right at the beginning of the long parentheses that I refer to from time to time. And there he says almost the same words that he says here. He says he's talking about forgiveness of sins through the keteiros that come from higher than Ishtalshus on Yom Kippur. So it comes from a place from Atik, he says. And he says, I'm reading from page 725. Atik, exactly the words here. There he uses the word yanika. In mitzvahs, there can be some form of gleaning that they can nurse or get some, there could be a yanika from the negative, God forbid. The Bolimanai brings the same Ayim Chazal, that the garments could be worn down. And he goes on even further and says that Torah actually protects us. It says Shomer, Zeh Mishnah, when it says Mishnah, Shomer, Sheshemer miyanika sachitzein. Okay. And there he refers to part of Shalom Ranat, which I looked up, but there he doesn't talk about Tuma. He talks about the difference between Torah and Tefillah, which is also on page in Ayin Beis, volume 2, 789. He also talks about it. The difference, he says, because Torah is coming from the top down, it's Elokus coming downward, so therefore it has an element that repels and does not contract impurity. Says that very clearly. The bottom of the page. Yeah. So Torah has that power. Whereas mitzvahs, since mitzvahs are being done from the bottom up, that means that they are part of this world. It's not the Torah. Torah is Dvar Hashem. Mitzvahs is a command of Hashem. But the bottom line is being done in this world. And since it's, like he said earlier, Vavke, and connected connected to worldly matters, so there could be an achiza. That's so far what I've found. But the Torah makes total sense, because since the Torah is Bar Hashem, like fire, so it has an ability to repel any type of negative impurities. So that's that. I'll look more to see if I can find more, but so far that's what I discovered. So with that said, so let's now move on. We're going to continue learning 4 lines from the bottom on page 1297. So he says like this. One second. Okay. So he says, well, if he's yesh, and according to this, we can say the mashakos of Havaya, Yechat Merivov, that the opponents of Havaya are eliminated. It also refers to Havaya de Le'ela. Now, if you recall, when he began discussing it on page 1292, he said it's going on Havaya de Zoh. In Havaya de Zoh, there he says, Shaykh Sham Meriva. There can be a battle. There can be a conflict. Because the Kavas Smoil in Zoh, Gvura, Zoh is the Mides, Chesed and Gvura can oppose Chesed. I'm reading the paragraph, the first lines in the paragraph, the middle paragraph, the second paragraph on page 1292. So he says clearly, Havaya there is Havaya del Tato. And that's why you need to have the growth of Zoh, the maturity and the development. So to reach the level of Havaya de Le'ela, I'm just reading for there. Let's second. Havaya de Le'ela. I'm just looking when he says that. 1 second. Actually, he doesn't say that. He says, through Tkir Shefer, you eliminate the judgments. And that's where he began speaking about the two apostrophes of the Gershayim, the two aliyahs. One aliyah is Zah to Keser, and the second aliyah, I just want to go back there because I want to see how he spoke about Havaya del Tatava. The second aliyah is Primis HaKeser to Atzmus Ein Sof. Okay. Now, where does he go back to Havaya del Elo there? 1 minute. Oh, then he says, Derech Klal, these two aliyahs, the first one is the Shem Havaya del Tata goes to Shem Havaya del Elo, the Shem Havaya of mitzvahs, Rotzene Elyon, right? And the Aliyah Beis is Atzmus Ein Sof, that's higher than Shem Havaya del Elo, that's who, higher than Shmoy. Right. That's what he said before. But what the question is, Havaya Yechata Meriva, it goes on which one does it go? So initially he began that it goes on Havaya de Zah, and then it gets elevated, and that's where there's battle. But remember, he asked the question back on page 1210, if Havaya is the place, Havaya Ish Melchama is the place of battle, so then how can you have the elimination of the enemy in the same place where there is a battle with God, where the godliness is associated with a battle? Bnei Elokim are challenging Havaya. So you have to say, he said, that there's two levels of Havaya. So now the Rebbe Rashab is going back and explaining it all. That Havaya Yechata Merivav is also going on Havaya de Le'ela. So let's see what he says, and then we'll tie it together. I just wanted to make sure that I'm referring back to the earlier pages where he talks about this. Yeah. 1 minute. Havaya, good. Just looking back on 12:10, that's what he said. Kiyadua. So if you look back on 12:10, he said, so in other words, you have seemingly not a contradiction, but on one hand, you have an opponent to Havaya. On the other hand, you have a level of Havaya de Le'ela that eliminates opponents. So both are hinted to, or both are alluded to in this verse. And he says he'll explain that later. So I guess he's going now back to that topic now. So he says like this, I'll explain more as we learn it. I just wanted to tie it all together. The Mashikosu Havaya Yechat Merivav Koi al Shem Havaya de Le'ela. Koi Gam. That it also refers also to the Havaya de Le'ela. Now, what's the Lefizeh? Lefizeh, because we're talking about a level that eliminates opponents. Not sure what the Lefizeh is. Does he mean Lefizeh based on everything we've learned, or based on the last few lines or the last page? I'm not sure. So let me continue reading and then try to clarify this. Va'ayim Mashikosav, v'pirush ha'idra rabba, l'talmidei Arizal. So Idra Rabba, as we've discussed a number of times, is a section in the Zohar, in Parsha Nosei. The Idra Rabba is the large community or the large group, the 10 students with the Rashbi. Then 3 of them passed away, and then there's a thing called the Idra Zuta, the small group. And that's in Zohar and Hazinu. That's when Rashbi passes away. So Idra Rabba is called Rabba because it's the large group, so it's just a section in the Zohar when Rashbi had all the students with him and he was teaching them. So there's a commentary from the students of the Arizal, which is called B'Sefer Koil Barama. It's the name of a sefer from the Talmidim of the Arizal that explained the Idra Rabba, Daf Yud Beis Omer Aleph, and the Rebbe Rashab is here now also. Rafai Mashkosu B'Shemes Sosen. Shemes Sosen is another Kabbalistic work from students of the Arizal. Shar Maimer HaRashbi. Actually, it's a commentary on the Torah of the Arizal. So Shar Maimer HaRashbi, what is Chovshin? Kol Shkem Ben HaKeser. Maybe he means that paragraph. I have to look it up.
וחוסר שם.
What?
וחוסר שם.
What?
חוסר, קסימו.
What? I don't understand what you're saying.
יש ווב חופשי. זה לא שטבס.
What are you saying? I don't hear.
וחוסר שם.
I don't think so. I think it's the paragraph in Maimer HaRashbi, that's V'kosh Kein Bein HaKeser. That's what I think. Because it doesn't make sense. V'kosh of Sham Bein HaKeser, he's not saying what. I have the Sefer, 1 minute. I have the Sefer here. I'll just look it up. Hope I can find it quickly. Shar Maimer HaRashbi, V'kosh Kein Bein HaKeser. On the Ider Rabbah, 1 minute. I should not say I said, right? One minute, guys, 1 minute. Just email it to me. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, I don't find it quickly. So I'd have to look this up. Okay, I'll look it up and tell you what I find. To me, it sounds like it's referring to the Shar Maimer HaRashbi on this Ider Rabbah and the section that begins V'kosh Kein Bein HaKeser. But I may be wrong. Okay. Anyway, what is it? But Mashakosher Sham Be'ider Rabbah Daf Kuf Ches Amud Beis. So just give one of the commentaries the students of the Arizal say on what it says in Ider Rabbah Daf Kuf Ches Amud Beis. So Kuf Ches Amud Beis is the page number in Zohar. That's why I'm looking at it. I don't seem to find that. Kuv Chav Ches Ayin Beis. Just give me another minute here. 1 second. Oh. Okay, I actually did find it, but it's in a different place. It's a little confusing here. Okay. I'll look at it later. It's not, but so what does he say? So there, Rabbi says the following. The Atik Kadisha Yosef al Krusaya, the level of Atik Kadisha, the holy Atik, is sitting on its throne, on its chair, on its seat, which is actually the verse, Atik Yemen comes from a verse in the book of Daniel, where it says, it's a vision of Daniel. It says, Atik Yemen Yosef al Krusaya, famous expression, his garments are white like snow, and his head is white like tzemer, like wool. That's the verse in Daniel. Just to give you the source, that's the place where Atik Yemen is stated. Now, literally, Atik Yemen means the one of many years. Atik Yemen means the old one, the one of aged years. That's what Atik Yemen means. But in Kabbalah and Zohar and the later Kabbalah talks about Atik Yemen at the level that we talk about Pnimius Keser. So Atik Yemen is not just the one of, Atik means old and Yemen means days, the one of many days. Like you say by Avram Zaken ba Yomim. Avram aged and came into his days. So Atik Yemen. However, Atik Yemen refers to this highest level of Keser. So the Zohar says, Atik Kadisha, Yosef al Kusaya, and the Shvivin li Kafilon. What does that mean? The Shvivin li Kafilon. Let me just see how he touches it. Kusaya de Shvivin. Sorry, I didn't read it right. He sits on the Kursayan of Shvivin. What is Shvivin? Shlomi, you know what Shvivin is?
Maybe in its sparks.
And I think it means he sits on a throne of something, like a throne not of roses. Anyone good at the Google? You want to Google it?
What do you want me to Google?
These words, Krusaya de Shvivin.
I'll look it up.
Let's see what I come up with.
There's just a hey after the curse, after the yud. He's got an apostrophe.
No, there's nothing. There's let me see.
In Ayin Beis. I joined late, but you're on the last line of 1297, right?
Yeah.
So Korsaya, there's got an apostrophe. It looks like it is an aleph?
No,
or
you don't
hey?
need a precise. Krusaya means a throne. That's clear. I'm looking at what the Shvivin means.
Okay.
Not sure what it means. Okay.
But I'm trying to look it up. I need the letter.
Okay, fine. It's all right. Let's see. The Pirush Arizal, Lekafyalon means to subdue it.
What is it saying there?
The
Ushvivim.
Pirush
I don't
Arizal.
have the sefer. Atik Yoimin Yosef
It's fine. It's fine. I'm reading from Ayin Beis. You can follow Ayin Beis at ayinbeis.com are all the pages if you want to follow the text. The Pirush Arizal, the Arizal says, Kusai de Shvivin, Heim Kufchaf Sirufim, Shel Elokim. On the next page, 1298. They're referring to the 120 different permutations or tzirufim, combinations of the name Elokim. So Elokim consists of 5 letters, Aleph, Lamed, Hey, a Yud, and a Mem. So 5 letters, when you think of all the different combinations, can add up to 120 different ways we can order those letters. Just like, for example, the letter Av, Aleph Beis, has 2 tzirufim, Aleph Beis and Beis Aleph. 3 letters has 9 tzirufim. So 5 letters has 120 different ways. So it's called the 120 tzirufim. That is Kusaya Deshvivin, the 120 different combinations of the name Elokim. Shein b'chutz lahamakif, they're outside of the makif. Umispashtim b'derech hispashtus eras virus ad sefa asiyah, and they extend. B'derech hispashtus eras virus ad sefa asiyah. They extend through the extension of the spheres, the energy, the light of the spheres. So the chutz l'makiv, the makiv is atik, the makiv is kes. Okay, they go through ad sefa asiyah till the end of the world of asiyah. The reish shem Elokim zeh magia ad keser. So basically, the 120 combinations of the word of the name Elokim are referring to this energy that flows all the way down to Asiyah, and the head of it, the Reish of Zeh Elokim, of the Reish Shem Elokim Zeh, reaches all the way up to Keser. That's what the Zohar is saying. So Atik came Yasiv al Kusai Deshvivim Likafyala. Okay. I'll explain more of this once. Let me just finish reading it and see where he's going with this. So what do we know from this? And what's the connection to Havaya Yechat Merivav? I'm not sure yet, but we'll figure that out. So he says like this. And elsewhere it's explained that according to this, you can say the Bnei Elokim. Now he's going to the Bnei Elokim that challenged Havaya. Remember the Bnei Elokim, the Isyatzav al Havaya. So the Bnei Elokim heiman nimshachim mepchinas Ayin Beis Sirufim Hanal. So Bnei Elokim, like the children of Elokim, they extend from the 72 Sirufim. I'm not sure how 72 fits in here. 120, how does 72 suddenly get in here? Not sure. And in order to eliminate this opponent of the Bnei Elokim, that's through transmitting from the Helam Ha'ir that's higher than the name Havaya. I know it sounds very cryptic, but let's read it and then I'll explain. The Oz Gam B'Shem Havaya Meir B'chinas HaPrimis Ve'atzmis. So when you're getting from the level of Helam, which is even higher than Havaya, like we learned before, higher than Shmoi, that then radiates also. So that also causes that Shem Havaya should radiate its inner and core level, as we explained earlier, because the Helam, the power from above, comes downward as well into Havaya. And through that, the enemies or the opponents and the prosecutors are eliminated. Okay. This needs good explanation because what is he adding exactly? And what's the meaning of all these words and ideas? But I'm going to read till the end of the paragraph. And this is what the pasuk says afterwards. B'shamayim yiram. So after it says Havaya Yechat Merav, it says B'shamayim yiram, that in heaven he he thunders against them, from the word ram, like a thunder.
Yareim.
B'shamayim yareim. In heaven, he thunders against them, against these enemies. As Rashi says there, that even when they go up to heaven, he also basically eliminates them. And according to the simple interpretation of the verse, it's referring to the Adam Bliel is, of course, the Samach Mem, the negative forces. The Adam Bliel is the enemy. And they're the prosecutors that God is thundering against them, or above them, upon them. Omnom, that's the Pasuk to prat. In other words, the Pasuk is saying like this: Havaya Chatam Merivav means that the opponent. Can everybody mute? So there's no extra sounds, please. So Havaya Chatam Merivav means that the opponents will be shattered, the opponents of Havaya. Then he says Havaya. What'd you say? How you pronounce it? You know him. Okay. And he thunders against them, which means
Yarim.
That he thunders against them. The Mekatrigim, those that come to prosecute and invoke the severities, Yarim Aleim, he thunders upon them. Omnam Yesh Lefarish, that's a simple interpretation. However, you can explain that Olav means not just Olav, Yarim, Olav B'Shviloi. So Olav could be upon them. Upon them, he thunders upon them. In other words, he comes down strong upon them. But Olav could also be Shviloi. It means for him. The Chem Pirish b'Mitzudas David, and that's how the Mitzudas David on the verse in Shmuel, he explains it. Ba'avur b'ni. He's doing it ba'avur b'ni, for the good of his son, of his child. V'koy al shem Havaya sheb'shviloi yorei min hashamayim. And it's going on the Shem Havaya that for him, because of him, b'shviloi, he thunders from heaven. So is it b'ni or Havaya? Okay, b'shviloi, bavur. Meaning that the Sudas David also used the word Allah means ba'avur, because of, due to him, b'shviloi, for his purpose. So in other words, it's not talking, Allah is not referring to the enemy, to the prosecutor, it's referring to Havaya, that he's doing it to protect Havaya, so to speak. So it's referring to the level of Helam Ha'er, Shenimshach Misham Tesu Ser B'Shem Havaya. So for the Shem Havaya, he's reaching and accessing a level of the Helam Ha'er to increase the energy in the Shem Havaya, and through that, he shatters or eliminates the enemies. Okay. So this needs to be dissected a bit in detail. The Rebbe Rashab is adding some points to what he's been discussing earlier. This is clearly more than just a summary of the last section. He's tying up the knots of what he began in beginning and talking about this verse, Havaya Chatam Merivav. So first of all, we established that Havaya is not just the level of Shem Havaya de Latata. There you can have an opponent. Then here we need to reach in Shem Havaya de La'ela, like he said, going all the way to the Etzem, the higher aliyah of the Gershayim over Havaya that reaches all the way up. So remember, the Gershayim indicate both Havayas. The aliyah of the Havaya de Latata to Havaya de La'ela, and the aliyah of Havaya de La'ela to the Helam of who? The Etzem, like he said before. So let's just begin with that. I think if we understand that, this section will be understood better. I'm just going back where he says that explicitly.
That's a new thing. No, yesterday you said that the second aliyah is to the higher level in Shmoy.
Please, it's confusing enough right now. There are a lot of people on the call and this class. Let me explain the whole thing, and then you could ask all the questions. So give me the ability to explain the whole piece here. Okay. So to go back, let me just go back to the beginning here. So in Shem Havaya de Latata, you have the capacity of the Bnei Elokim, like he said on page 1287, where he said these words exactly, that Yavoyu Bnei Elokim Nisyatzav al Havaya, on the day of Rosh Hashanah, the Bnei Elokim are invoking judgment, and they're challenging Havaya's chesed and kindness and compassion. And this is Kvuras de Kedusha. We're not talking about severe, cruel, harsh severities. This is Kvuras de Kedusha, the Tvei Din. If you want more details, go to page 1287 on top of 1288. Bnei Elokim, like a ben shemedag de b'yesal cover the av. Fine. So what do? Since in Zoh, in Havaya de Latata is possible, there should be Merivov. The Merivov here include the Gvuras of Kedusha. They're challenging. They're saying the Jewish people are standing in judgment, and you can't just be compassionate. Some of them are guilty of sins. Like he says, that the medagding al heder ba'aveda, either they're lacking aveda and lacking the hamshach seiros that mitzvahs are supposed to draw down. From that will come the Gvuras koshes, like we learned, and vice versa. But that's not what's relevant right now to us. So in Havaya de Latata, you have the ability for a challenge. That's yichatu. That's why you have meriva. The question is, how do you eliminate? What's the response? So Tkiya Shefer, we learned on Rosh Hashanah, it goes higher. It goes to the source. Like, so just I'm referring again back to on page 1290, he says, V'zeu mashkosh Havaya chatu merivav. The Bnei Elokim have b'chinas Gvuras de Kedusha. V'eimdim leneged b'chinas Shem Havaya de Chesed. They're coming and standing up against Shem Havaya of Chesed. So what do we do? So that's why he says on page 1292 that there's a meriva. So now we need to go to a higher place. We need to elevate Zoh up to Chochmah and Bina, Abba Ve'ima, all the way to the Yichud Pnimi, to go to a place that's higher than the natural wiring and structure of Chesed and Gvura. And we go to the level of Havaya de Le'ela. So that's the first aliyah of the Geshaim, the Havaya Yechatim. We go to Havaya de Le'ela, and there you have the power to eliminate this opponent, because less smaller Bahaya Atik, like he explained on page 1293. Just a minute. Let me just make sure I have all the levels here. On 1291, I should say, actually. Yeah. So this is the level of Keser now. Keser is from the word Karas. It cuts off. What does it cut off? The enemies. Like he said clearly, he said that it has the element of eliminating the judgments, subduing them, and then Keser is Karas. It cuts off that they shouldn't have any power, these Gvuras, even the Gvuras of Kedusha. But then comes a second aliyah. There's another aliyah afterwards that he talks about on page 1293. And that second aliyah in Gershayim is that Pnimius HaKeser goes to Atzmus Sein Sof, because the Bnei Elokim are rooted in the Tzimtzum Arishin. So even though you eliminated the judgment on the level in the level of Zoh, of Atzilus, in the Shtalshlus, but we still have to contend with the Tzimtzum, with the Gvura of the Tzimtzum. So now comes the second aliyah, and it goes higher than the Tzimtzum. That's the second aliyah. And the same thing the same thing is in the case of. Let me just go 1 second. Where was the long? Okay, so on page 1294, he explained that the same thing before the Tzimtzum, you also have these levels. You have Shem Havaya de Latata. You have the Shmoi, which is Yud K and Vav K. There's the Aliyah from Vav K to Yud K. That's the first Aliyah, and then there's the Yud K and Vav K, the Shmoi Tahu, which is the Helam. So the Helam is ultimately the highest place you reach, and that's where everything is eliminated, because it's higher than Seva V'Mamala and higher than all the different tracks. That's what we learned back then. What the Rebbe Rashab is doing now is bringing it back to that theme that after we discussed this whole idea of the two aliyahs, that's why I feel that this should be a new paragraph, because it's confusing. Right? You read it right after he speaks about Torah and mitzvahs. Torah and mitzvahs is both the level of Shmoi, of Yud Kei Vav Kei. So I think the Lefize Yesh Leimer, regardless, bottom line is, so now he's going back that Havaya is talking about Havaya de Le'ela, which is the force that eliminates the merivov, the opponents. And what he's adding from the Idra Rabbah is coming to explain the higher level as well, that it's not just reaching Havaya Delayla, it's also reaching Helam, that's even higher than Havaya. But that in too empowers Havaya with the ability to eliminate, because it says Havaya Chata Merivov, the Havaya. So first you could read is the opponents of Havaya, but it's also the level of Havaya that eliminates. So which one is it, Havaya or the Helam? Is it Shmoy or who? And the answer is, you go all the way up in the second aliyah to who? To the Helam. The Helam is higher than everything. And that has the power to transform, that has the power to eliminate the opponents. That is Nimshach into Havaya de La'ela, which in turn eliminates all the opponents' merivov. That's what he said here in this piece here. So he's just adding, I think, sources for it from the commentaries, from the commentary of the Talmidei Arizal. I still have to figure out what exactly means Kursaya, the Shviv, and the Kafilon, but it's clear that he's talking about bringing the Shem, the Bnei Elokim. You're going all the way up to the root, the Kufcha, the Tzerufim, all the way up to the root, goes to Keser, and there, basically, from that level, you come and eliminate the judgments that they invoke. So it comes from the Helam that's higher than the Havaya, like he says, the Helam and that in turn empowers Havaya, and that's how they get eliminated. Then he brings the end of the second half of the verse. Olav b'shamayim yiram yarem. I keep forgetting how to pronounce it. Anyway, bottom line. So the question is, what does Olav mean? So Olav b'shamayim, you could say, is referring to the Merivov, that on the enemy is thundering against the enemy. But he says a deeper meaning, you could say, yesh lefa, or not deeper, you could say yesh lefarish, that is b'shvil Havaya. In order to empower Havaya, to eliminate the opponents, that's why he thunders, and that thunder is coming from the Helam. That gives power to Havaya to eliminate the opponent's Merivov. That's how he interprets the second half of that verse. So the thundering is actually coming from the level of Havaya, the Helam, which is higher than all these levels. Now you could ask the question, why do we need the Helam? But ultimately it's because the Helam is higher than any level of Gilui, and it really that's why it has the ultimate power to eliminate everything. Like we talked before about Tshuva. If you want to reach Zdenis Naslech Ezachius, which we'll soon talk about transformation, meanwhile, he's been talking about eliminating the enemies. But the ultimate elimination and their ultimate transformation has to come from a level that's altogether higher than every Gili, altogether than any Gili, even the Gili of Havaya, as we learned earlier. But the key thing is going to be transformation, which is going to be the next section here. I hope that helped in understanding it. But to me, this is coming and just tying the knots of what we learned earlier, because it's clearly referring to the whole discussion, not just the pieces we learn now. So even though, let me just see one more thing. Torah, there's no klippa. Okay, so Torah has this level of Havaya. Torah is definitely Havaya de La'elo. We said that before. As is mitzvahs. Torah mitzvahs is both Havaya de La'elo. The difference is the Vovke or the Yudke. So that's higher than the Shtalshlus, than existence. But here we have to go even higher than that. We have to go even higher than Havaya, which he said explicitly on page 1293. Okay. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes.
So the Kesser is who, right?
No.
No, Kesser is not who?
No.
Kesser is Shmoy.
Atik Yemen.
Anyway, where do you see that? Where do you see that he says that Atik Yemen is who?
Because we learned the whole entire time that this is the second aliyah that comes from
No,
Shem
the second
Havaya
aliyah is
Le'elo.
before the Tzimtzum. No, I'm sorry. The first aliyah is from Zot to Kesser, including Atik. That's the first
and
aliyah.
the second.
The second
So what
aliyah
is
is from Kesser to before the Tzimtzum.
So who is before the Tzimtzum?
One second. This is states explicitly in the mimer here. So I'm not, if you have a place that you refer to otherwise, show me the line. I'm reading straight from Ayin Beis. He says it clearly. Look on page 1293. He says it explicitly. Aliyah Beis, Anyway.
This is not Kesser.
What is not Kesser?
The Lemailo Mishem Havaya De'Le'elo is
Why don't you look?
right?
Do you have the Sefer in front of you?
No.
So when you have the Sefer, read page 1293 and then get back to us. What should I tell you? You have to look inside. He talks about this.
Rabbi Jacobson.
Yeah.
Isn't this a little discouraging that in order to ultimately conquer the Mekadrigim, the Bnei Elokim and all that, you have to go up such a high level to who? I mean, I would think that if we Halavai could get up to Kesser or certainly Lifnei Tzimtzum, but even in Atik Yomim, in Kesser, there's no Ein Smola. I thought we could go up to there and bring that level down to defeat the Bnei Elokim, the Gevuras, Kashas, and so on. We have to go all the way up to who? Is that what the Rebbe's saying here? That's such a big job, isn't it? Such a big task.
And going up to Atik is not a big task.
But it's not all the way to the top of Mount Everest.
No, tell me, did you ever go to Atik? Did you try?
No, I don't know. Maybe, maybe on Simchas Torah.
Listen. Going up to Atik, I would wonder, how does one even go to Atik? That's where I would begin before we talk about even the next level. Now, I discussed several times, the Rebbe Rashab is giving us the whole picture for all people on all levels. You have to find these two levels inside of you. The only way you'll ever understand this. So I can't answer your question. The answer is everybody has these two aliyahs within their avodah. And that's where you'll find your answer. And yes, it is avodah. Just like tshuva, when a person sins, they need to do tshuva. They need to go to a higher level. That's not easy. We know that. Because you can't fix a problem from the same problem where the problem was created. So you need to go deeper. Moshe Rabbeinu had to go up on Mount Sinai and get Yud Gimel Midas HaRachman and these highest levels in order to get forgiveness of Yom Kippur. So that's exactly right. We need to go up. And there's generally two aliyahs in that process. So right now, let's just talk about the two aliyahs. First, understand what they are clearly. From Zot to Kesser and from Kesser to before the Tzimtzum. In before the Tzimtzum itself, he spoke about on page 1294, the two levels. But before we talk to that, first master and understand the two aliyahs clearly. If you can say that right now to me or to anybody in this class or to another person in a clear English that we understand, then we'll talk about Shmoya and Hu. That's how I would suggest learning this properly. Explain the two aliyahs that we need to go through to deal with the challenge of the Bnei Elokim of the judgments. Remember, all of us stand in judgment on Rosh Hashanah. God gave us a mitzvah called Shefer that allows us to pierce the heavens and go to a deeper place to deal with that. That's what we're learning here. But what does that mean? What does that exactly mean in Avodah? And what are the two aliyahs in this process? That's where I would begin. And then I would go and say, okay, now that we've established that, let's figure out how bedakus, subtly, these same two levels are before the tzimtzum. Because remember, it's all microcosm, macrocosm. You have to first understand it in the basic terms, and then you can say, so now let's understand it in the context of Shmoy and Hu. I have to say this, your questions are very mathematical to me. You know, you're looking, here's Hu, here is Shmoy, here's Atik. Atik sounds logical, you can reach, but Hu seems to be impossible or very difficult. I don't see it that way at all. To me, I barely can reach Asiya Ruchnis. Who's talking about Kesser? The Alter Rebbe would tremble when he said Atzilus. Not Kesser of Atzilus, Atzilus. So to me, the first thing is we have to figure out a way to understand this in terms that we can relate to. Or else we're just talking words. And if you're talking words, if you can go to Atik, you might as well go to Hu. Why not? Atik is quite a high level. Atik Yemen, Netak, Nivdol, it's completely higher than all of our Shtaushlos. Now, relatively speaking, Atik, like he said, is lower than Lifnei Tzimtzum. But if you talk relative to lower than Atik, Atik is like Lifnei Tzimtzum in a way. I mean, so relatively speaking, when you go from Zoh to Arich and Atik, There too, you have all these levels, which I think I explained somewhat. So I think first we have to understand what it means in a way that we can say, oh, I relate to this. Once you relate to it, then we say, okay, so how do we go to the next level? And why do we need the next level? Now we're going to learn about the need not just to eliminate opponents, but to transform them. That's going to be the next section. And there, who comes into play big time, much more than even till now. But it's already relevant because at the end of the day, Moshe Rabbeinu had to invoke and access the deepest levels above to be able to get Salachti Kidvarecha. Yom Kippur is a very, very high level. Look, it took Moshe to get the Torah 40 days. Now, the Torah is a pretty powerful level, right? And yet it took him double amount of time to get forgiveness. You ever think about that? The whole Torah in 40 days. But Slicha Mechila, Salachti Kidvarech, he needed 80 days, double amount. That means he's going to levels that are even higher than Torah, which is Raisa V'Kutshabricha Kulachat. My point is, we're talking such high levels that once we're talking that's so high, it's hard to even relate to. That's why we have to find ways to say, okay, here's where I am. Here's where there is judgments that are challenging my life and can stand before God and say, one second, this person does not deserve chesed. He deserves to be judged. He deserves to be punished, or definitely doesn't deserve kindness because of what he's done. And how do you resolve that? How do you get to a deeper place? So I spoke about it psychologically. There's the element of what do you do after you deal with suffering and pain, which is a form of gvura. How do you find deeper strengths? That's one way to go about it. But there's a lot of ways to explain it. That's the approach I would take. So your questions are all legitimate, but I want to turn it back into Avodah, because the only place you're really going to get an ultimate answer, what it means in your life. Because anything else, it's what's levels. Yeah, the Eibishter says you have to reach, you have to reach. You know, you ever hear the expression when a person does Torah mitzvahs, so they're reaching the Ratzon Hashem. When they're doing tshuva, they have to reach the Baal HaRatzon. Why? Because the Ratzon has been defined. It says this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do. Once you've transgressed, you have to go back to the engine room that was higher than the Ratzon, to the Baal HaRatzon, who chose these Ratzon, who channeled this Ratzon in the first place. So these are, yes, high levels. That's why tshuva is such a high level. I mean, that's in the context of tshuva. But remember, shofar and all this ultimately is going to connect to tshuva as well. So I hope that helps contextualize this. I'm not giving an exact answer. I'm just saying it's the only way that I think we can really understand. And is it difficult? I wouldn't call it discouraging. I would call it empowering. It means we have the power to go there. There's no reason, there's no way that Rabbeim would talk about this if they're not telling us that we have the strength to go there. So we can go to those places. Now, I have to translate what that means. What does it mean to go to a place? Remember, to go to a place that's higher than Shiur, higher than structure, that's why Baal Tshuva is higher than a tzaddik. You know, any one of you that grew up in a more secular world and Tinik Shenishba, and then came to Yiddishkeit, you had a taste of Elokus that's higher than structure. The rest of us grew up only in the Judaism of structure. Torah mitzvahs, Shabbos, kashrus. So it's true that it began in, let's say, in things that were the opposite of Torah, but it wasn't your fault. So means that it came from a deep Helam. And we know that Helam is rooted in the Helam Ha'atzmi. So when you do tshuva, you're actually accessing a reality that's higher than the structure of Yiddishkeit, the regular structure that a tzaddik has, Adam Yasher Helach, the healthy structure. You know, a healthy person does not need to access deeper resources. It's only someone that has to struggle. And then the only way to heal is to go to a deeper place and access much higher level. In many ways, that's the level of Helam that he spoke about before he got to the whole Havaya Chat Meriva. If you go back to page 1287, we speak Zdoinus Naslem Kazachis, why you need mitzvahs alone is not enough. You need B'chol Moedecha, Mesiris Nefesh. And that's what led into Havaya Chat Meriva. So the theme we're talking about is going to places that are beyond structure in order to remedy or to mend or heal the structure. And then that's why he's saying from the Helam comes back into Havaya. So we have to find that Helam, each of us in our own way, and how that's even higher, because at the end of the day, Havaya, even the highest level of Havaya, is higher than Zah. That's true. And that's why you need it. but it's still at the end of the day Giluyim. Remember, he said even the highest Gilui la'atzmei is still in the world of Gilui, where Helam is outside of that world. And that's why you can really draw a new energy, unprecedented energy, and ultimately really eliminate enemies in the deepest possible way. As long as you're still in the world of Havaya de La'ela even, there's still something commensurate with Havaya de Latata and with the Giluyim of existence. And that's why you really need to go to a place that's beyond all of that, that connects to the Helam Ha'atzmi, Yechelis Ha'atzmus, like he said earlier. So I hope that's been helpful. Okay?
Great. Yeah. Very, very good. Very good. That's an amazing point what you say about it took 80 twice as long to get to achieve tshuva than to receive the whole Torah. It's incredible.
Right.
Stuff. You know, just as a side point, is I often say, you know, a person that has a schus of, so to speak, doing tshuva of a certain level, then he has to do a second tshuva. He has to do a second tshuva. He has to keep doing tshuva. But, you know, once he becomes part of Chabad or a Torah mitzvahs life, then the second one is, in a way, I think, even harder to keep doing tshuva, so to speak. You know, you gotta go that second aliyah that you're talking about. Whatever. It's just from my personal experience.
You asked something, maybe I missed it. What was the last thing you said, Eliezer?
I just said that I speak about to myself, and you know, you do tshuva, say once, and you become part of the Torah mitzvahs lifestyle, and then you have to do that second aliyah, which is to keep going. And you know, that's, to me, that's the one that is in a way harder.
Just one second. They told me, it's very clear, the wire running in has to be removed. The emergency services were here on Friday. Yeah, we're here 10 times. And that's why they left, because they said they can't work with that asbestos. As soon as the asbestos is removed, they said they come back. They opened that hole already twice. They know what they have to do. Asphalt down there? Yeah, asphalt, yes. That removed? They did, they worked on it. They had a whole crew. They worked on it for hours. I'm extremely sorry. I mean, you know, we can't do nothing, but I'm going to make sure I stress that to them. I'll hold back. I'll tell them to remove, you know, more expenses. The clear access issues resolved, and then they'll send another crew over to. Yeah, but why? An emergency crew. We already have a crew. I think maybe the other phase will give rid, so maybe it's concealment, the other phase also like maybe spraying also, so don't have full voltage on it. That's possible. What's happening? So when is that going to get this? It's the same thing, Shane. Yeah, that's the same. Sorry about that, guys. That's a little issue here. Okay. So anybody, you were saying? Hello?
We're here. By the way, I found something that somewhat translates.
Let me just end the recording. There's no reason for. So let me see. We stopped at the top of the paragraph on page 1298. Let me just.